योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोतं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि। आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारिणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम्।
Good morning. In today's episode, we will see Adho-Mukha Svanasana. Adho-Mukha Svanasana is also popularly called downward dog because it resembles a dog stretching itself. It is also one of the standing extensions where a practitioner stands as in a standing pose and then extends their spine forward in a concave back position. In the previous episode, we saw Uttanasana. It is particularly sequenced such that Uttanasana was before and now we are doing Adho-Mukha Svanasana because both the poses have many commonalities. Though they are distinctly different, both the poses are also used in treating many common medical conditions such as blood pressure, heart condition as well as spine problems. We will now see how to do Adho-Mukha Svanasana. We will now run you through the instructions of how to do Adho-Mukha Svanasana. In the previous episode, we saw Uttanasana and this pose, this asana will start with Uttanasana. Starting from Tadasana, like with all standing poses, the practitioner bends forward to Uttanasana. We'll start with the feet and toes together, knees and thighs back, kneecaps locked, quadriceps lifted. Roll the shoulders sharply back, pull the back ribs in and raise the chest well up, hands by the sides of the thigh. From there, you will have to place the hands back on your waist and move forward into Uttanasana, elongating the spine, engaging the dorsal and placing the hands shoulder width apart in front of the feet. There, pull the dorsal in, push the thigh back, to make sure you are already engaging the way it should be in Uttanasana. The palms should not be too wide or too narrow and therefore it's important to keep the palms exactly as per the width measurement of the shoulder. Pressing the palms down, you walk back one leg after another generously such that the distance between the feet and the legs are a minimum of 4.5 feet apart. It shouldn't be too short or too long, but it's important to have a crisp, generous opening between the arms and the feet. The weight should be such that between the palms and the leg, there should be an even distribution of weight from where you build the pose. Pressing the entire palm, the wrist, the center of the palm, and each one of the phalanges, the sole of the palm is well pressed. The upper arm is sharply ascended into the socket in such a way that the length of the upper arm gives the liberty for the whole spine to be released upward and backward. Initially, the heels are kept at a 45-degree angle up. The heels should be not too up or too down, at a 45-degree angle up. Pressing the palms, you have to lengthen the side of the body and make sure every vertebra has a capacity to lengthen one away from the other sharply back. The hip should not fall over the lumbar spine. The hip should be pulled back. In order to do that, it's important to slightly bend the knee, sharply rotate the thigh such that the thigh rotates from the back inner thigh to outer thigh and from the front out to in. The entire thigh must go through a circular rotation with which the hip is lifted, the knees are engaged backwards, the quadriceps are sucked upwards, the quadricep is pushed back in such a way that the back of the thigh spreads and opens. The shin should go back sharp, and from the toes, the metatarsals you should lengthen into the heel. That is, I mean that from the toes you should find an access point to the backmost part of the heel, such that the back of the leg becomes completely in your awareness. From there, moving the hips and thighs back, you have to take the dorsal, as in back middle ribs, sharply in without compromising the length of the spine. So spine tall, at the same time dorsal in. Finishing that, you will step forward one leg after another in Uttanasana and then stand again in Tadasana. The classical pose in Adho Mukha Svanasana is done with the feet and toes, the entire stretch of legs joined together, and we will now see that. I wanted to clarify that many times in Adho Mukha Svanasana there is an urgency to put the head down. Nevertheless, it's important to note that the spine should first be well extended, the hip should be pushed back, the hands and legs should be strongly engaged in a way that the spine is extended backwards and upwards, and that should cause the head to descend to the ground with sharp dorsal engagement. You should not touch the head to the ground in a way that the spine crashes down. We will now show you how to do classical Adho Mukha Svanasana with the legs together. Starting from Tadasana with the legs together, toes together, thighs back, chest up, dorsal sharply engaged, collarbones wide. Take the hands on the waist and bend down to Uttanasana. Keeping the hands shoulder width apart, you step back with your right and left leg with the legs together joined as in Tadasana. Initially, it's important to keep the heel at a 45-degree angle and not to place the heel down. And I'll show you why. When the heels are up, the hip is tall and the spine is well extended. But when the heel is dropped to the ground, it can so happen that the spine shortens and crashes. In Adho Mukha Svanasana, it is all about the lengthening of the spine, and therefore initially, until a beginner gets used to the pose with adequate practice, it's important to keep the heel up at a 45-degree angle. Pressing the palms well, you will have to elongate the spine in such a way that the upper arm moves sharply to the socket, and from the side of the body you should lengthen through the side of the hip. Vertebra after vertebra should be extended one away from the other, giving plenty of space and mobility for the spine. The thighs should grip the hip further, hold it back. The thighs quadriceps should be pulled back, gripped back. The knees should be back. The calf muscles should be back. The shin should be back. Elongating from the toes towards the heel, keeping the hip lifted up, the practitioner should ensure a tall spine as the heel extends far back and down. Again, it's important to note that the heel does not crash to the floor. It has to pull the hip, extend back, and then release itself to the floor, completely opening and engaging the back of the leg. You have to lift the sides of the thigh up and really pull the spine far back and tall. Finishing that, take the dorsal in. Taking the dorsal in, the head, as you see, has gone down because of the dorsal engagement and the length of the spine. Note, the spine is not collapsing. You have to keep the spine long as the dorsal engages and the hip remains far back and up. Finishing that, you step forward into Uttanasana and then stand up in Tadasana with the hands by the sides of the thigh. We will now show you some of the common obstacles that students face and ways by which props can be used to alleviate those problems. We'll go straight to Adho Mukha Svanasana, and as you can see, In this structure, the dorsal is out and the length of the spine is such that from the armpit to the outer hip, I'd like you to note the length of the spine and the fact that the dorsal is a little swollen, it's not engaged. I would ask the practitioner to hold the mat on either side, strongly grip the mat and stretch the mat away from the foot. The foot is back, so the mat has to be pulled forward. While doing that, lengthen the side of the body. As you stretch the mat, simultaneously suck the dorsal spine in. As you see, there is a complete change in the profile or the engagement of the dorsal, with the palms stretching the mat forward, sides of the body lengthening upward. Dorsal should strongly be taken in, due to which the head descends towards the floor. Here, the head is not being sucked in, head was kept away, dorsal in, and finally, with the spinal extension and dorsal extension, the head was released downward. So, the mat is now used as a prop to engage the dorsal. Relax. Step forward. Tadasana. We will now talk about some of the common difficulties that a practitioner may face with both the length and alignment of the spine. Here is an Adho Mukha Svanasana. And I'd like to draw your attention to the engagement of the spine. This is the entire length of the spine, starting from the cervical all the way until the tailbone. As you can see, the middle area of the spine, the dorsal, is sharply or hyperextended, hyperengaged, whereas you see the rounding off of the two sides of the spine. Here is a lack of alignment, that is, it doesn't pull into the medial spine line, it pops up. Again, moving to the area of the shoulders, if I crisply show you the area of the shoulder blade, you can see that the shoulder blade pops out and therefore prevents, there is a lack of pulling in or engaging into the medial line of the spine. Again, this part is hyperextended. It takes a heavy strain where these two areas, that is the lumbar and the top shoulder blades, show a lack of alignment or engagement. Now, we will show you how to address that using a rope. As you see, there are 3 levels of rope, one at the bottom, one at the top, and one at the middle level. This middle level rope is approximately at the hip level. As you can see, if the practitioner stands against the wall, this rope is approximately hip level, and it is this rope that we'd be using. You wear the rope around your waist. In such a way, the rope is properly aligned at the groin. Now, this rope, where the rope moves to the abdomen, is absolutely incorrect and should not be done. The rope should be placed at the groin, firmly adjusted at the groin, and then a practitioner should step forward until it's tight and will not slip. As you see, once it's loose, it may lose its placement. So you have to walk forward until the rope is firmly placed, and then you bend over. Placing your hands down, you walk your feet back to the wall on either side of the bottom hook, so the legs here too are hip width apart, and then you have to walk your hands as forward as possible. You have to note that every time the hand walks forward, it has to attempt to lengthen the spine, so every step that the hands take is not abandoning the spine. It has to pull vertebra by vertebra, lengthening it, opening the rib cage, and then going sharply with the hands forward. As you can see, we saw initially the lack of lumbar engagement, where the lumbar did not come into spine line. As here you can clearly see, there's a beautiful straightness of the spine, a crisp alignment where the dorsal is not over engaged, the shoulder blade or the lumbar is not under engaged. There's a uniform engagement of the entire spine and a sharp lengthening. This is particularly greatly relieving for the entire spine and the lower back. stepping back with the hands and stepping in front with the feet. You then squat slightly and then get up in Tadasana, removing the rope. As we mentioned even in the previous episodes, there are 4 standing poses with forward extensions that we have seen in this 26 episode series, which are Prasarita Padottanasana, Parshvottanasana, Uttanasana and Adho Mukha Svanasana. All these 4 poses have active phases as well as restorative phases. In the restorative pose, it provides a great amount of relaxation and rejuvenation for the entire body. Conditions of fatigue, anxiety, stress are also relieved. The heart as well as the ventricles of the heart are also de-stressed. We'll see 2 ways of doing the restorative pose in Adho Mukha Svanasana. In one, the practitioner goes to independent Adho Mukha Svanasana, where the hands are placed forward and the legs are drawn back. The brick has to be adjusted midway between the arms and legs such that the practitioner is first able to lengthen the spine, take the dorsal in and then place the head on a brick. The head has to be placed and rested on a brick, the forehead area, so that it provides sufficient relaxation to the head and brain while the body is still in an alert phase. Here, the activity of the spine is not compromised, but the entire pose is rested. With the prone position of the heart, it gives a good relief to the valves and ventricles in the heart as well. In this position, the practitioner must remain for a few minutes as long as it's possible. The second variation is using a rope. Here the practitioner will use the rope as discussed previously. The legs are placed equidistant from the hook. The spine is lengthened, taking the hands forward, and then once again taking the dorsal in, the forehead is rested. As you see, because the rope holds you back, there is a good lengthening of the spine, so the alignment and length of the spine are not compromised. At the same time, the head is relaxed and rested, due to which it serves as a potent rejuvenating pose. Staying there for some time, going from seconds, building to minutes, the practitioner then releases from the pose, stepping forward with the legs, back with the hands, and then standing up. Having shown how to use a rope for Adho Mukha Svanasana, we will now tell you why a rope is used. A rope offers a particular traction where the hip is held back. The hip is not in a position to fall over the lumbar spine at all. The hip is tractioned and held back, with which the spine travels freely forward. So one end of the spine at the hip is held back, against which the spine anteriorly lengthens forward. We will show you the same action without the rope to explain how a rope actually functions. The practitioner will now go into Adho Mukha Svanasana. Moving to Adho Mukha Svanasana, I place my hand over the area where the rope goes. When I pull it sharply back, you can see the length which is acquired when the hip is pulled back. This is what a rope does. When I drop it, the spine comes crashing down. And therefore, the rope acts as a very important prop to provide traction to the hip, upon which the spine greatly lengthens. Once again, without which the spine can collapse. Coming out of the pose, we use a rope to educate a practitioner, raise their awareness as to how an asana must be done. Using a rope, you get an understanding with which a practitioner then should perform and practice the classical asana. In today's episode, we saw how to do Adho Mukha Svanasana and then discuss some prop variations by which some difficulties of students may be addressed. I wanted to add that props can be adjusted in various ways. There are 100 different ways by which a prop may be used to align or better an asana. This varies with every student's constitution and condition, and hence this is a deep study that must be undertaken under a certified instructor. Adho Mukha Svanasana is one of the poses that come as standing forward extensions. The other poses that we have seen are Prasarita Padottanasana, Parshvottanasana, Uttanasana, and in this episode, finally Adho Mukha Svanasana. These are poses in which the spine extends forward, establishes a clean concave back positions and on which the hip is strongly held back. In all these poses, there are active variations as well as passive variations. Adho Mukha Svanasana is a quintessential pose and hence must be practiced every day. It is for this reason that Adho Mukha Svanasana is also introduced or incorporated in Surya Namaskara so that practitioners can practice it regularly. Like Uttanasana, Adho Mukha Svanasana greatly helps release stress on the heart. The ventricles as well as the valves are de-stressed in Adho Mukha Svanasana. Also, because the spine goes through a full extension, conditions of the spine such as disc prolapses, disc herniation, disc desiccation, all these conditions are greatly alleviated. Particularly Adho Mukha Svanasana is a boon for spine patients, people with spinal problems. Also, in these set of asanas where the head is down and the hip is higher up, they greatly help the immediate practice or are a mandatory precursor for inversions, because in inversions, be it Shirshasana or Sarvangasana, the head is lower and the hip is higher. So through the regular practice of standing forward extension, one can successfully prepare themselves for inversions. In the upcoming section, we will see sitting poses. We will start with Dandasana in the next episode. Thank you.